south. And if that's not forthcoming, if China and India decide to go forward and limit their emissions, which is a significant commitment, then there's going to be a complete injustice in the system, and there's going to be no balance to it. It'll be a huge crime if India and China are forced to go ahead with carbon emissions reductions without any compensation from the developed world. Because in the UK we've got 60 million people, and yet of the carbon in the atmosphere causing warming at the moment, only 1.2 or 1.3 times more of that is Chinese, when they've got 1.3 billion people, than Britain with 60 million. So it's overwhelmingly our responsibility, the Europeans' responsibility, and Americans. And if we don't accept that, then the developing world has a right to be furious with what we're doing. Brazilian Prime Minister Helen Clark has given a speech about the importance of climate change. Brazil has made clear its aversion to taking on binding targets. The Woods Hole Research Centre is announcing technology that enables rapid analysis of extensive areas of vegetation, so this is really interesting in terms of actually paying to preserve rainforest, because we all know that rainforest destruction is a really significant contributor to climate change, and it doesn't occur in a linear manner. This is a really important thing. If we keep deforesting the Amazon, if we keep deforesting large areas of rainforest where they exist, then this can change the regional climate and cause a positive feedback, which means drying out and forest fires and eventual conversion to savanna becomes more or less inevitable. So it's really important that we tackle deforestation quickly, otherwise we face tens of billions of tons of extra carbon being released and leading possibly to runaway climate change. So deforestation has to be a top priority, and monitoring that by satellites and saying they've definitely not cut the forest down is obviously part of this. So that's good research from the Woods Hole Research Centre there. I should say also that it's not just rainforest. Peat bogs are a huge component which are often overlooked. Have you ever heard of peat bogs being a significant contributor to climate change? Most people haven't. I'd suggest you look up peat fires in Indonesia if you want an example of this. One year, Indonesia was a greater emitter of carbon emissions than the US. Another fact, do you know that? That was, I think that was 97, I take it as a guess. It was a bad El Nino year where there was a particularly bad drought. Right, then I've got a post on protests and demonstrations and lobbying going on. In terms of lobbying, the World Business Council on Sustainable Development, which is a really interesting organisation. I encourage you to go and look at what they're doing, because on the macroeconomic level, on the large scale, the conflicts in terms of climate change between people and companies that you expect to exist just don't really exist, because on the larger scale, a price of carbon across the board internationally would not be a problem. Who's got a competitive advantage or competitive disadvantages? The one with competitive advantage is the more dynamic company. So it's not. Companies in general aren't going to be against a carbon tax, for example, if it's universal, because no other company's got an advantage over them. It's just like an across-the-board increase in prices. They just absorb it. You know, it's not pushing customers in one direction or another. The main thing that's needed for businesses is long-term policy certainty, and it's really amazing if you consider this. And you can look at what businesses want if they to make it easy for them to make green decisions in an economically rational manner. And So you can go in as an environmentalist or someone who cares about climate change and look at government policy and say, that's appalling. From a business point of view, that's just appalling what you're doing. There's examples of this in the UK climate bill, if you've looked at that. Some of the plans are, I think, pretty ridiculous. Greenpeace used the Bali climate talks to highlight the global disaster that is palm oil production, so good on them. Groups working together on development and adaptation are getting together. So this is led by the International Institute for Environment and Development, I believe. They've got adaptation and development days, which is important to get together to talk about the problems of helping the poor to develop their economies in a climate a manner which is not too vulnerable to climate change, because there's lots of really interesting, good ways of helping people to farm in more productive ways and to get their water and to meet all their basic needs. But it's becoming increasingly clear that you've got to make sure that these methods are not just high yielding, are not just providing the needs well in the average year, but are also resilient, so that as climate change kicks in, there's an ability for people to adapt. And then the last thing, my last post was about video and audio from a conference, because there's going to be a huge amount of coverage from this. I mean, and there's a lot of it's going to be really interesting stuff. I mean, we reckon there's 17,000 people going to be there. So, if you're into your right-wing sort of news media, then you'll have noticed that everyone's saying, "Oh, it's terrible. All these people are flying in." So. It's just laughable. It's so cynical. I mean, who gives a fuck, really? I mean, what people are there to do is to change the system. I mean, the fact that getting somewhere to meet together to make a world-changing decision is currently high carbon is part of, we're going to change that. We need to make it so it's low carbon, but it's ridiculous. If you're going to fly for anything, then it's going to be to try and reduce emissions across the whole globe. It's completely insignificant, but people still love to jump on this crap because there's a lot of really cynical bastards out there. Right, so there's going to be a lot of audio. The National Environment Trust have already done a briefing on Bali, so that's one interesting thing. The UNFCCC has got its own YouTube channel, which it didn't last time, which is quite good. Enviromedia, which kind of name gives its sort of mission away, will have live updates, and the Tropical Forest Group have also got a vlog about deforestation from Bali. So that's a few, and all of these posts, for example, that was on video and audio, and the other one was on protest and lobbying and so on, and the other one was on the run-up to Bali. All of these are going to be updated regularly, so that you just have to check back if you're interested on these topics. And all of these posts are grouped together under the label Bali. So if you click on Bali at the bottom of any of these articles, it'll bring up all the rest of them, so you can just browse through. Right. Well, if you're in Bali, then good luck. It's not just a networking occasion. Do whatever the hell you can to get the politicians to actually come to an agreement on this. If this means doing things which seem unreasonable, if this means being pushy, then just do whatever you can. It's not just a networking opportunity. You've got to actually try and save the planet. There's a hell of a lot of hard work that has to be done. So really go at it, okay? This shit matters. So if you're not in Bali, then just follow the blog for any updates, and be at the Global Climate Campaign on December the 8th.